Hi, I'm Alex, but many call me Dr. Mama Bird. I'm a wife, a mom, a chiropractor, and maternal health care advocate. After a traumatic birth experience that led to an unplanned C-section over 6 years ago, I found myself searching for answers on how to heal. Even though I was in the maternal health care space myself, I found it difficult to find the resources needed to truly recover and restore my body. After 2 years of research, I found myself pregnant with our second child and was able to have an amazing redemptive VBAC birth experience with my dream team. After that incredible experience, I felt God had placed on my heart a mission to help other mamas and families have a similar redemptive experience. And in time, with my husband's help, we developed the C-section restoration method. On this journey, we've met a ton of amazing healthcare providers that are often considered hidden gems in the Dallas area. Now, as a part of that mission, I'm here to connect you and other families with the incredible healthcare providers who are passionate about supporting you and helping you to achieve your family's health and wellness goals. I'm Dr. Alex Pankoke, and this is the Dr. Mama Bird Show. Welcome back, Mama Birds. This is Dr. Alex here, and today I'm super excited for this episode because we're going to be interviewing a really dear friend of mine. She has been a part of one of my birth teams, my amazing birth team. And she's also a multifaceted woman. She's a mama, she's a business owner, she's a therapist, a doula, and so many other things. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Miss Courtney Butts. She's going to share with us a little bit more about yourself.
Yes, I'd love to. My name's Courtney. I own a private practice, Soulfully Rooted Wellness, here in Dallas, Texas. We specialize in working with perinatal mental health population. So we work with families from fertility, conception, through pregnancy, postpartum. So yeah, we love working with families and being there, showing up, doing all the things.
Awesome. We're so glad to have you on the show. We've been interviewing tons of different providers who are gems in the DFW area who are able to bring a different perspective, a different type of support to that crazy transition that happens when you become a parent, whether it's the first time or the fifth time. And so to start, I'd love to just get to know a little bit more about how you got started in maternal health care, especially as a doula and a therapist.
Yeah. So that's a really good, it's my favorite story to tell. So kind of going back to the beginning, and I'll make it quick, but I wanted to be a labor and delivery nurse, and that was my plan. And then about halfway through education, I was like, no, general organic biochemistry kind of took me out. So I got my major in psychology, and then I got my master's in social work. And then from there, I'd planned on working in the social work field and didn't think about birth again until I got pregnant with my son. So we decided to have a birth center birth. So working with a midwife, hiring a doula, and that's kind of how I got introduced into the birth world. And then I loved working with my doula so much. I was like, this is really cool. I want to do it too. So I got my doula certification, worked as a doula for about a year or so, and then I left my 9-to-5 to doula full time. And then that's also when I opened up my private practice. So for the past, I guess, 6 years, I've been working both as a doula and then as a therapist. So that's kind of how I got here.
And you're kind of a famous doula. You've been in magazines and magazines.
Yes, I've been very lucky to attend some amazing births that had some amazing birth photographers. So there's a few pictures out there.
Yes. So Courtney's been my doula in the past, which was just an incredible experience. And it's just such a blessing to have her on my birth team. So I just have to toot your horn right there.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit more about your practice now. Like, it's growing since we first started connecting. It was just you, and now you've got a whole team. Tell us more about that.
Yeah. So we are based out of Plano, Texas. There's myself, and then it's a team of 6 of us with varying specialties, really focusing on perinatal mental health. And then we have some clients that really focus on grief, brain injury. Myself, I love working with individuals and couples who are expecting. So I really, really enjoy working with couples, whether they're expecting their first kiddo or their 5th kiddo, but just how a new kiddo kind of changes the dynamics between, a family and a couple, and being able to talk about communication changes, talking about changes in intimacy and how we connect, and just kind of the day to day. So I love that.
Tell me a little bit more about what maternal mental health is, because I feel like we hear postpartum depression and that's like the buzzword, but it's so much more than that.
Yeah. So I like to say, for us specializing in perinatal mental health, it's kind of all of it, right? So I have some clients that are trying to conceive, right? And we're kind of working through and talking through their journey and through conception. And then of course, pregnancy, and then like postpartum, like that's what people think of, postpartum depression and postpartum anxiety. But we like to look at the person as a whole. So being able to look at family of origin, right? And how that impacts how we show up during a pregnancy, but also postpartum in parenthood. We like to talk about culture, right? So being pregnant in Texas, being pregnant in Dallas, and, you know, what does that look like and mean for that individual, for that family? So it's really looking at the person and environment, looking at all of them and who they are, and then being able to support them, give them their options and resources, and kind of just walk through the entire journey. I really enjoy working with clients when I get them early on. So whether it's trying to conceive or when they're pregnant, and then being able to walk through their pregnancy with them is really special. So that maternal piece, and then looking at the mental health. So looking at, are there any signs of depression or anxiety prenatally, right? And then how do we work through that and address that? And how do we spend time prepping for life after baby?
Yeah. And I love that mental health has become something that it's not so hidden, I guess.
Yeah, or like taboo
anymore. And now you actually work with moms before we even get to the point of having had the baby, being is preventative the word I want to say?
Absolutely.
But
Absolutely.
you know, just, you know, checking in with yourself and having someone to support you in that process is something that you recommend for
absolutely
most people, right?
Actually, today, I had a consultation with a client. She's 6 months pregnant, and she's like, I want to be able to establish care now, right? So then I have time to kind of process through. She was able to identify anxieties that she had, and we're going to be able to not only work through those together, and I'll get to put on my doula hat through that, but also forming the relationship now. So then postpartum, we've already, you know, talked about family of origin. We've already talked about, you know, fears and anxieties in relationship with her partner. So then we can really focus on postpartum and what that looks like and feels like for her.
Yeah. Proactive. That's the word I was looking for.
Yeah.
I was looking for. I think so many families, you know, there's so much that comes into a relationship. We have a lot of times premarital counseling. We have other types of options to be proactive, but sometimes we kind of forget, like we prepare for the birth and forget, like, you know, there's a whole lifespan after that. And so tell me a little bit more about how you can help families, whether they have already had their first child or if they're like thinking about it, how to help get on the same page, or, you know, open up some concepts that maybe haven't been touched or won't be touched until you step into
to talk about it. So like, it's interesting you say that. So I like to say, pregnancy and then postpartum's a lot like the wedding and then the marriage, right? So like often people spend so much time, money, and energy, like engagement parties and bachelorette parties, and then the wedding. And then what we forget is that the real work starts after I do, right? And I think the same thing, people invest a lot of time and energy in the pregnancy and, like, you know, decorating the nursery and picking out a stroller, but also we need to think about what is life going to look like after baby's here, right? So food and expectations from your partner, expectations from family and support. So for me, I think it's really important to be able to look at all of those things and think about my previous mental health, right? So if I am pregnant or thinking about becoming pregnant, like, what's my mental health history? Have I struggled with, you know, depression or anxiety? And knowing that that's probably going to show up postpartum, being able to look at support system, right? Do I have family here? Do I have friends here? And how will I be able to lean into them during my pregnancy journey and also postpartum? So I think conversations, thoughts around that. I love initiating conversations with parents around their childhood and their relationship with their parents and what they want to be similar or different when they become parents. But then also thinking about those that have other kiddos, right? What did we really like about our first child, right? And what did we do really well? And what could we have improved on? And then being able to take those improvements into that second pregnancy and postpartum, I think, is important. So
I love that you share that, because that's something that you really helped us with as a doula when we didn't realize we had he was 2.5, 2 years old. And one of the things we didn't realize is while we thought we were on the same page with how we wanted to parent, our backgrounds and how we were parented were so different that we hadn't really delved in enough to really get on the same page to know. And that created, for a lot of parents, parenting toddlers is challenging. It's fun, and it's an opportunity to grow. We'll just say that right now. That's what it is, an opportunity to grow. And you can grow closer together through that process when you start to identify what are some of those things, like your origin, your family of origin, and how you guys may have done things differently. And while conceptually you have a similar going in the same direction, just how you can go about it can be so different. Absolutely. Getting on the same page is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I'm very passionate about in this moment, yesterday I got back from a conference in California talking about sex during the perinatal period, and just like intimacy and connection with your partner, right? And just like we're so busy preparing for the new baby and postpartum that a lot of times the relationship with your partner is neglected. So I think it's so important to think about, like, how are we going to connect? How are we making sure that we're prioritizing like date nights, communication, and just loving on each other. So also something that I don't think a lot of people think about postpartum. We're thinking about diapers and strollers, and we're thinking about meal trains, but we're not thinking a lot about our own needs, right? But then also how we're connecting with our partners.
Yeah, and having some expectations ahead of time that are clear. And we've talked to some pelvic floor therapists. I work with C-section recovery. There's also a physical aspect to that is taboo to talk about, that a lot of times people are completely unaware of how physically it can be challenging to connect intimately, comfortably with your partner, even sometimes months up to years later, if you don't have the right type of support and healing process. Hence, that's where the C-section recovery program came from that we do. But it is definitely something that should be talked about, and just like education beforehand, that's a big piece of like having a plan, but also having like an understanding of what is potential reality and what tools do we have in our toolbox to continue to support our relationships if we do need a different type of support than we thought.
Right. I think that's one of the things I love about being a doula and a therapist, and not that other therapists can't do this, but the connections that I have with the birth community, right? And knowing like, okay, one of my therapy clients is telling me about something. I have an amazing chiropractor that I can refer you to. I have a pelvic floor therapist, and being able to talk about the benefits of those services and being able to refer to those. So absolutely.
Yes. So we were just talking about this with another guest a little bit ago about exactly that. Dallas DFW is a plethora of resources and providers who are passionate about what they do. So if you need support in anything, just reaching out to one of us likely will connect you to hundreds of us. We all know each other. And if we don't know each other, we know how to find the person, and we're here to support you. So if you're a mom and you're like, man, like I have a question and I don't know who to go to, just find one of us.
Somebody.
We'll hook you up.
Right. Absolutely.
For sure.
Absolutely.
So something I'd love to talk about too as well is the fact that you're a trauma-informed provider, but you also teach other providers. I've taken your course.
Yeah.
I'd love to learn or share with the audience a little bit more about what does it mean to be a trauma-informed healthcare provider, and how does that play into the birth world?
For sure. So someone who's trauma-informed is someone who understands trauma, understands the impact that it has on you, not only mentally and emotionally, but physically. And then what I feel like is the most important part is a trauma-informed provider is going to work to seek that you're not re-traumatized. They're going to do everything within their power that you don't experience re-traumatization. So for me, in being able to provide support to birth workers and healthcare providers, it's about understanding what trauma is, and then being able to say, okay, this is what trauma is. This is how it has the potential to impact people. And then how do I work, communicate, plan my services to support these survivors, right? To support the patients and people that I work with. So it's something that I love, and just giving people a different way of thinking about something or even phrasing something. So for example, as a doula, one of my intake questions, it's more of a statement, but it's more so of any previous trauma can sometimes be brought about or stirred up or highlighted during birth. Is there anything that you want me to know? Right? So it's nothing that's like, check here, yes or no, if you've experienced trauma, but it's kind of, information that your trauma can show up in your birthing space. And is there anything that you want me to know? Is there anything that I should know as your support person? And for me, that is being trauma informed, that I know trauma happens and I know that it can impact birth, and I want to create a safe space for you to share. And sometimes I get clients that are like, here are all the things about my trauma. And I hear it and we talk about it and process it. I have some clients that have said things like, it's not an issue at this time, so therefore I know there's probably some type of trauma, but we don't want to talk about it, and that's fine. That gives me the information I need. So yeah, that is a way that I try to be trauma informed. Also ensuring that I'm being as inclusive as possible and being able to include all types of families, and making sure that my services are accessible to all families. I think it's also being trauma informed, being inclusive, and being a part of the community.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's so beautiful to have that consideration as any type of healthcare provider.
Yeah.
When you step into a situation, and also recognizing that sometimes trauma can happen vicariously. Sometimes it can happen, the provider can experience trauma in an experience from working with a patient, and to have the opportunity to not just understand what it is, but to realize and recognize, am I being impacted as a provider by this experience, or have I been, and how is that potentially informing how I'm working with other patients? Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when it comes to, like, you were talking about buzzwords, right? And I think birth trauma is also one of those like buzz phrases that people are talking about. And when it comes to birth trauma, I'd love to share a little bit about it and kind of what it is, since people are talking about it. So birth trauma, first recognizing that trauma is an event or an experience that impacts the way that we see the world. So a lot of times with birth trauma, it can be something, a lot of times when people say birth trauma, it's usually a loss, right? So whether it's a loss early on or a stillbirth, or it could be like a NICU stay. And that's what we call big T trauma. Things that when people think birth trauma, they typically think about those things. But in being one, trauma informed, but also thinking about birth trauma, it can also be what we would call little T traumas. So it could be, a precipitous or a quick birth, right? When people hear that, they're like, oh, I went from first contraction to having my baby in 3 hours. And a lot of times people are like, oh my God, that's so amazing. But realistically, it can be scary, right? And your body's trying to catch up to your brain, and like, it's like a whole thing. So that can be traumatic for some people, right? It could be thinking about postpartum for people that have an oversupply, right? So people talk about the stress of undersupply when it comes to breast milk, but for those that have an oversupply, that can also be traumatic, because we are thinking about, constantly having to pump or being engorged or mastitis and kind of all the things. So when it comes to talking about trauma and birth trauma, we have to understand like it's this kind of all-encompassing piece, because the other part, the most important part about trauma that I forgot to mention, is that it's subjective, right? So what I think is traumatic may be different than what someone else thinks is traumatic, right? So if someone's telling me about their birth, or they're telling me something, whatever it is, that they might say, yeah, it was traumatic. And that's the truth for them, right? My opinion doesn't matter. And then also on the flip side, as a doula, there's been some births that I went to and I walked away and I was like, whoa, like that was rough, right? And there's that secondary, that vicarious trauma where like, I need to like call my therapist or call a friend, like I need to decompress. And then when I follow up with the mom or the birthing person, they're like, that was so amazing. And I felt so empowered and great. And I was like, wonderful, perfect, I'm glad, right? But like for me, there is that piece of like, that was really hard for me. And then how am I caring for myself, right? And how am I showing up for myself in those situations? So
I love that you share that, but it is so subjective. Like you said, I had that 3-hour labor the last time, and that's why I giggled. And yes, not something I would recommend, but I wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
necessarily experience, I didn't experience it as traumatic. I experienced it as redemptive and empowering.
Oh yeah.
And then, you know, going into as a provider or even just a friend, going into a conversation with another friend who has recently had a birth, just recognizing that how they experienced it is their reality. You know, I had a C-section. For me, it was extremely traumatic. It was, you know, everything was safe. Everything was fine. Afterwards, I processed it. But, you know, leading up to working through that, it was very traumatic, not having the experience I was expecting, and so many different things that layered on in that experience. And so at the same time, I've had friends, I've worked with other mamas who have had C-sections, and they had a very similar experience. And it was, you know, the biggest blessing. They were so happy about their birth. They would not describe it as traumatic. So me putting it on them was like, oh, you had a C-section. It must have been traumatic. That's not necessarily the case. It's whatever you felt it was, it's what it was, and vice versa. So.
Absolutely. And I think that kind of goes to, often people say like, healthy mom, healthy baby, right? And like, yes, that's important, but I like to say healthy and happy mom and healthy and happy baby, right? And just like if someone's sharing their story, her friend is sharing a story, or a family member, that their experience is their experience. So, you know, by dismissing them and saying, well, at least you're healthy, right? And at least, you know, anytime we lead with at least, it's usually not the best, right? So being able to hear their story and listen and validate and empathize, I think is what's most important when someone is brave enough to share their birth story. Yeah. That we're not judging or labeling.
And with working with couples, that also plays a huge part too, because not only can mom experience trauma, dad, other family members can experience trauma in the process.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about how that could potentially play?
So I love working with individuals, and I mentioned I love working with couples, and I love being able to get the non-birthing partner in there and like, Dad, tell me about your experience, right? What was it like to witness all the things, right? And it's very interesting that sometimes their stories are the same, right? And it lines up. And then sometimes, especially for the supporting partner, that there can be that secondary or vicarious trauma because they saw, you know, their spouse or, you know, their partner go through something tough, right? And being able to recognize that postpartum depression and anxiety is also real for partners, but also giving them a space to be able to process and be able to share their experience and that be validated, that it doesn't always have to be about mom and baby, but that a partner has a space to be able to share their story and process and potentially grieve as well.
Yes, that's so important because it is a team. As a family, we are a team. We work together. And so making sure everybody is taken care of is really the priority. I think we have such an infant-centric society that a lot of times is, as long as the baby is eating and pooping and doing the things, everything's fine. Everything's fine. It's fine. It's fine.
And everything's on fire around us, right? Yeah.
And so I love that you bring that perspective of looking at the unit, the family as a unit, in the environment. And it's just so much more than just, you know, checking off the box that you do when you go for your 2 weeks checkup and your 6 month and your 12. So, well, I'm so appreciative that we've had the opportunity to chat. Is there anything that you would love to share with the audience about taking care of your mental health as a mom or as a partner that we haven't gone over?
Absolutely. Yeah. I would say when it comes to taking care of your mental health during the perinatal period is being able to prioritize yourself and really sit with, what is it that I need? What's important to me? And then how do I get that? Right? So how do I talk to my partner? How do I talk to my family and friends about wants and needs that I have? How do I seek out support services? So whether that's therapy and, you know, if that's chiropractic care, if it's pelvic floor therapy, being able to say, hey, here's something that I read about, I'm interested in, I want to seek out, and then seek us out, right? Like, let's chat. And if, you know, therapy is not what you want or not what you need, perfect, right? You know, we can give resources and knowing that we're always here to offer support. But I think so often in this infant-centric society that, you know, moms and birthing people get lost, right? And like a year or two down the road, we're like, who am I and how did I get here? Right? So really being able to prioritize you, really think about what you need, what's important for you, and then how do we have communication around that, but trying your best not to get lost in the sauce and put yourself first.
Awesome. So beautiful. I love that. I would love to end on a note of who was your favorite, and obviously don't share any names or anything, but favorite story of a family that you've worked with that is just really touches your heart, that you're like, yes, this was so good.
Goodness. Of course, your birth comes to mind. Actually, I'm going to go with that. I mean, one of my favorite moments, I can't say names, but one of my favorite moments is sitting with your kiddo and him being able to see the birth of his brother. And I think that might have been one of my only births where a sibling was present.
Yeah.
And I just remember him holding him in my arms and just like watching his facial expressions change and seeing his mom's strength. Yeah. And I don't know if I even shared that with you, but I mean, that was probably one of my favorite moments, and just watching your family just grow. So
thank you. That was so beautiful. It was, it's so cool. If I can find the video, I'll put it up, but you could just see his face changing. And so there's this concept called reorganizational healing. And so having had, a traumatic physically for both my son and I birth experience, his entrance into the world, him experiencing his brothers neurologically did something that you can see in the video, him just seeing, like we've got a video of him sitting on your lap and his eyes just seeing what's happening. And before that, he wasn't really speaking, and we were a little concerned. Like we knew he could, but he wouldn't. And then after that experience, before we even left the birth center, he was like, I'm really tired and I'd like to go home. And the whole room stopped, and we were like, you can talk? Like everybody was surprised, like who said that? And it completely, you can just see the way neurologically his brain changed from that experience. So I'm so glad that you shared with me that was one of your favorite experiences. That was one of my biggest mind-blowing as a clinician experience, like from a neurological standpoint. I'm like, wow, like this is reorganizational healing, literally on film in process, which is really cool to see.
I love that. I love it.
Awesome. Well, I'm so grateful to have had you here today, and as a friend, obviously, for such a long time. And mamas, I just want to end here with, just as Courtney said, take care of yourself. If you need anything, we are here to support you. The DFW birth community is quite large. It is robust, and we all know each other. Like I said, and if we don't know each other, we know somebody who knows somebody. So, whether you have a family, a village here, or whether you're a transplant, you just came here and you feel like you're all alone, you do not have to be. We are here for you. We love you, and we hope you have a blessed day.